Before we begin, we'd like to know more about you and what you think of the show. Take our survey at thesecrettovictory.com/survey, and you'll be entered for a chance to win a free Gimlet membership. That's thesecrettovictory.com/survey. And now, on with the show. For most Americans, April 7th, 2016 wasn't a notable day. It was a crummy day for the stock market. The Dow dropped 174 points. Trent Harmon was declared winner of American Idol. But Chicago Cubs left fielder Kyle Schwarber was about to have one of the toughest days of his life. He was in Arizona, and the Cubs were playing the Diamondbacks. Walker Stadler, Kyle's good friend, was watching the game from home.
It was probably around like 10:30 back in Chicago. I was all jacked up because he had a great 2015.
Kyle and Walker played baseball together at Indiana University. And when Kyle moved to Chicago to play for the Cubs, Walker showed him around the city. Kyle had joined the Cubs midway through the 2015 season as a rookie, and he'd made a real entrance, hitting 5 home runs in the postseason that year. That made him the franchise's all-time leader for postseason home runs. He was the kind of talent that could help bring this team their first championship in more than a century. But that evening, on April 7th, and just the third game of the 2016 season, all that promise would be disrupted.
It was like the second inning of a game in Arizona.
The Arizona Diamondbacks' Gene Segura was up to bat.
Fly ball left center, pretty well hit. Back goes Schwarber and Fowler.
Both Kyle from left field and Dexter Fowler from center field went sprinting to catch the ball.
They were both going full steam ahead to go grab it. And Dexter Fowler kind of dove head first, and Kyle tried to reach up over top of him, so he kind of undercut him and took out his left knee.
He collided with Dexter Fowler, and he was down on the ground.
This is Cheryl Ray Stout. She's a sports reporter with WBEZ in Chicago, and she's been covering Chicago sports for more than 30 years.
And at that point, you never know how seriously a player is injured, but he was down.
Rounding third is Segura, inside the park home run. Schwarber is shaken up. Schwarber laying flat on the ground out in left center field. Their bodies got tangled up. They collided fairly hard. He is in pain, laying down in agony.
I was sick to my stomach when I saw the collision itself.
Greg Schwarber, Kyle's dad, was watching at home in Ohio.
But I knew when I saw him crawling on the ground and beating the ground that he was hurt bad. I knew then that more than likely his season was probably over.
With more than 20,000 people looking on, trainers examined Kyle's knee. He couldn't stand up on his own. They hoisted him onto a golf cart and drove him away. Famously, the Cubs had gone 108 years without winning the World Series. The American flag had only 46 stars on it the last time they were champions. And this team, anchored by young talent like Kyle, it seemed better positioned than pretty much any other team in the history of the Cubs to finally end that streak. But they've been dealt a huge blow right from the start of the season.
I couldn't be there for the guys.
This is Kyle Schwarber.
I wouldn't be able to contribute on the field, and I knew that we had a special team. I knew that we were going to do something big. I didn't know what it would be, but, I just wanted to be out there with these guys.
This show is about how great athletes use defeat to fuel victory. And there's no more fitting example of this than Kyle Schwarber and the Chicago Cubs. And that's the story we're telling today. I'm Domonique Foxworth. From Gatorade and Gimlet Creative, this is The Secret to Victory. The official diagnosis of Kyle's injury was a full tear of both the ACL and the LCL in his left knee. Essentially, the ligaments holding Kyle's knee together had snapped like rubber bands stretched too thin. Surgery for the ACL and LCL tears is intense. The surgeon removes the torn ligaments, then maneuvers new ligaments into position, using screws, spike washers, or staples to attach the ligament to the patient's bone. Expectations weren't high for Kyle to come back that year. This kind of injury can take as many as 9 months to recover from. In other words, he was out for the season. Kyle knew this from the start.
I have the surgery. The doctor tells me, okay, spring training. That's what we're going to shoot for, you being 100% for spring training.
He was told that there's no chance for him to come back this season. That was out of the question. And we never talked about him playing that year.
That's Greg Schwarber again, Kyle's father. Kyle was in a straight leg cast following the surgery, so he couldn't put any weight on his leg for 6 weeks. And for someone as active as Kyle, the initial recovery phase was a real challenge.
You got to use crutches. You got to pee in a bottle. You have to go take it to the bathroom.
I think it was probably, I don't know, the 3rd, 4th, 5th week, somewhere in there, where he was still non-weight bearing. And he came back and flipped the shades closed.
The shades would be down. I didn't want any light coming in. I didn't want to get up. My parents and everyone always thought I was depressed.
I don't know. I saw a depression setting in.
A lot of athletes who suffer injuries this serious have talked about depression and shutting themselves off from the world during recovery and rehab. So when Kyle's dad started to recognize some of these signs in his son, he tried to cheer him up.
And I said, look, we got to do something. We got to get out of here.
So he asked Kyle what he wanted to do.
He said, let's go shooting. He called a friend of his who had an archery range. They closed that range down, and Kyle was sitting on a chair shooting a bow for the next 4 hours, 5 hours. I think for him to get out and realize that his career's not over yet, just get out and do something. Yeah, I think maybe that was a pivotal moment for him.
I feel like I'm a self-dependent kind of guy. I don't need them to help me get into the shower. I don't need their help for anything, but I didn't realize how much help that I needed.
Baseball is as much a mental game as it is a physical one. There's strategy and intellect required to be a great player. And while Kyle couldn't swing a bat in a straight leg cast, he could do some homework. The Cubs were playing great. After 20 games, they had a 15-5 record and an early lead in the division. And Kyle wanted to contribute, so the coaches set him up to do some research.
I would bring home a computer. I would do reports on opposing teams, scouting reports.
Kyle would watch all of the Cubs games and all of their opponents' games, trying to learn their patterns and tendencies.
I learned about pitchers. I learned about hitters. I learned about managing a game. I felt like I wasn't going to get any better at baseball because I was sitting down. But I learned so much about baseball. I got mentally better during the game when I was away from it.
The way Kyle saw it, while he might not be able to play the game, he could certainly learn to understand it better and hope that when he came back, he'd have a leg up on the competition. By mid-June, almost halfway through the season, the Chicago Cubs were the dominant force in the National League. Up by 12.5 games in the division, they were favorites to make a long playoff run. And the heavy physical rehab was kicking in for Kyle. Everything about a knee injury is complex. The pain, the surgery, and the recovery.
I'm getting strapped down, literally strapped down with a seatbelt to a table, and they're pushing on my knee, trying to get range of motion back. And that's painful.
Here's his good friend Walker again.
He was at Wrigley Field every single day. I think he started at 10 a.m. every single day, so he would be there for umpteen hours throughout the day. And he'd come back just gassed.
I'd say house therapy. It's fine. He would never tell me. One day, his agent, he calls me and says, does he ever tell you about his therapy? I said, all I ever get is it's fine. He says, he squatted 350 pounds today. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
The doctors had told Kyle he'd be out for the season. But with Kyle's progress came hope. And with the Cubs playing so well, it looked like they'd be making a playoff run. And the longer they played, the better chance Kyle would have of coming back that season.
We'd be counting in our fingers how many months 9 months is. And that would take us to September, October, or November, which was when the World Series was going on.
5.5 months into his rehab, Kyle went to see his surgeon for a check-in. And the news was a real shock.
He's like, I'm not going to clear you all the way, but, I want to see how you do in some baseball. So, obviously I jumped up and I'm like, give me the phone. I want to call everyone, call mom and dad.
He called me and he's all giddy and I'm like, what is wrong with you? He says, he released me.
Basically, the doctor told Kyle he was free to bat, but couldn't play in the field yet. His leg wasn't quite ready for that kind of movement, but everyone else was more than ready to see him try. How did that call feel?
for him to have that chance again. That was a pretty cool moment.
When he got cleared, the rumors were going rampant.
Cheryl raced out again, WBEZ sports reporter.
We're like, wow, this could be something else because you're going to the playoffs and you could have Kyle Schwarber there for the World Series. That would be the only time that would be best for him to come back because they have the designated hitter.
Did you think that he was going to be able to hit Major League pitching?
Yeah, that was the wild card. If he's back, can he perform?
Kyle first returned to play for the Cubs Fall League team in Arizona. He played 2 games, hit a double, walked a couple of times. And meanwhile, the Cubs clinched the pennant. They were headed to the World Series to face off against Cleveland. And the big question on everyone's mind was, would Kyle be joining them?
He called and said, well, I didn't make it. He said, I didn't make the roster. I said, well, there's no shame in that. You tried, you did your best, and those guys are a heck of a team, and we'll go from there. And he starts laughing. He says, I made it, and I'm batting 5th, I think he said. So I could have wrung his neck right then, I would have.
Chicago Cubs baseball is on the air from Progressive Field in Cleveland, Ohio. It's Game 1 of the World Series. The Chicago Cubs against the Cleveland Indians.
In the first game of the World Series, he'd be facing Cy Young Award winner, Cleveland pitcher Corey Kluber. Cleveland got off to a quick start, scoring 2 runs early. Kyle came up to bat in the second inning. He hadn't faced Major League pitching in more than 6 months. But here he was, in the biggest at-bat of his life, on the biggest stage. His teammates, the millions of people watching, they all wondered if he was ready.
Yeah, that was the real question. Am I going to be good enough to do this for how many games that they need me? I didn't know if I was going to feel ready or not. I always joke with people, if I didn't have a good first at bat, I'm going to fake an injury, like, my knee hurts again or something like that.
And for all the hype, it was kind of an average at bat.
Now the 3-2 from Kluber. Schwarber swings and misses, strike 3.
From the outside, it seemed like he wasn't ready. But Kyle felt the opposite.
I was locked into that bat. Like, oh, yeah, he made a really good pitch there. But, if he does it again, he's not going to get away with it.
2 innings later, Kyle came up again.
And here's the pitch to Kyle. Swung on, hit in the air, deep right field. Back goes Chisenhall. Back near the wall. It's off the wall. Bouncing away, Schwarber's going to have a double. Welcome back to the Cubs, Kyle Schwarber. He just missed a home run by about 5 feet.
I jumped out of my seat. I did. Just for him to get a hit. I was just so happy for him. That all the hard work that he had put in was paying off.
The Cubs ended up losing Game 1 6-0, but Kyle was back. Through the first 6 games of the World Series, Kyle went 4 for 11 with 3 walks. He was hitting as well as any other player on either team. Heading into Game 7, the Cubs and the Indians were tied with 3 wins each, which meant this final game, was the most high-stakes event in a century of Chicago sports. Kyle's parents were at Progressive Field in Cleveland.
20 minutes before the game starts, he sent us a text, his mom and I, and said, hey, I just want to thank you for helping me get here.
How'd that make you and your wife feel?
Oh, what can you say there? Makes me emotional to sit here and talk about today. It was a special moment.
The game was a nervous slog. The Cubs pulled ahead early. They were up 6-3 heading into the 8th inning, but they blew the lead. Cleveland came back, tying the score and capturing the momentum. The game went into extra innings, and the Cubs were just 1 run away from making history, from ending a century-long championship drought. Drought being the operative word.
And then we had a rain delay.
And it is raining hard enough that the umpires have decided to delay things for the time being.
It was an act of God, a pause in the 7th game of the World Series, just as it was heading into extra innings. Nobody knew what to do.
So we will take a little time out? Is that our game plan here?
Sure.
Haven't had many rain delays in Game 7 of World Series experience. Not really sure what the format calls for in these conditions.
The rain stopped. The delay lasted for a full 17 minutes. And the first person up to bat after the delay, Kyle Schwarber. Cleveland took the field, and what happens next is not just muscle memory. He's not just swinging the bat as hard as he can. Kyle is calculating. He's actually falling back on all that strategic mental work he practiced while recovering from his injury. The scouting reports, the game management, just listen to how he talks about that at bat.
So the guy who was out there, he has a really good cutter. It's a pitch that breaks from his right to left, so left to right into me. So I'm like, okay, I want to back off the plate. I know he's going to try to throw me inside, and, I'm going to hit it hard. So first pitch was ball. Second pitch, I knew I wanted to get him down because I knew he was going to try to get up and in on my hands. And the second pitch was a little bit down, but I thought it was a good enough pitch to swing at.
Schwarber rips a base hit into right field.
That hit began what this team needed, and it was the right player at the right time, at the right setting, and that was Kyle. And that was huge. That was huge.
Kipnis was 30 feet out onto the grass and dove toward the line, couldn't get it. Schwarber continues to do amazing things, Ron.
And the buzz starting around was, you know what? This team, they got their mojo back.
His hit led off the inning to break that curse.
The Cubs scored 2 runs that inning and held Cleveland to just 1. Just 20 minutes after Kyle's hit, the Chicago Cubs were world champions.
And the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. The Cubs come pouring out of the dugout, jumping up and down like a bunch of delirious 10-year-olds. The longest drought in the history of American sports is over, and the celebration begins.
What does that win mean to the city of Chicago?
My grandfather came from Poland and used to deliver coal to Wrigley Field and Comiskey Park. So baseball is in my blood. And when it's in your blood and you get to see something special like this, nothing compares. It was a great time. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about my grandfather. It was, it was unleashing all the sadness you had connected with the Cubs to all the gladness that you were hoping to have, and it happened. I think one of the most interesting scenarios that happened was on the wall at Wrigley Field, the brick wall, people took chalk and they wrote memories down to somebody that they lost, somebody that they enjoyed baseball with. It was unbelievable.
After the series, there was a championship parade through Chicago. Kyle marched on stage to thank the team and the Chicago fans who supported him through his recovery.
Chicago! All right. I want to thank everyone out here. It was a crazy year for me. You guys kept me going through the rehab. All the credit goes to my teammates. They pushed me through it. They got to the World Series, and for me to be able to contribute, it was awesome. I love you guys. We're world champs. Let's do it again next year.
If Kyle hadn't been injured, it's still possible he could have found himself at bat in the last inning of the 7th game of the World Series. But the outcome might not have been the same, because he wouldn't have had all those months to watch the game, to study pitches, to sharpen his acuity for that pivotal moment. To paraphrase the great Ted Williams, even the best baseball players only hit the ball 30% of the time. If you're going to play the game, you have to be comfortable with just how much you're going to fail. Kyle takes this to heart.
Baseball is built around failure, for a hitter. A guy who's going to fail 7 out of 10 times is going to be in the Hall of Fame. And, for guys who are going to go through a tough time, like, hitting or whatever it is, you got to learn from your mistakes. and learn from you're bad at bat, or learn from why did you play that ball wrong.
Sometimes you fail because you make a mistake. You have a bad game or you need more practice. But sometimes a major setback hits you out of nowhere. It could sideline you. It almost ruins everything. But that's your chance. Thanks for listening to The Secret to Victory, a branded podcast from Gatorade and Gimlet Creative. Next week, Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan on their Super Bowl loss to the New England Patriots.
50 yards away, people are celebrating, a world championship, and in that locker room, just 50 yards from there, it's really quiet.
Subscribe to The Secret to Victory on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And thanks to those who've left reviews, especially OT Bulldog. Good luck on the varsity soccer team this year. This podcast was produced by Abby Ruzicka and edited by Eric Mennel. Research and writing by Noah Davis. Jorge Estrada is our associate producer. We had help this week from Julia Botero, Rachel Ward, and Nicole Wong. Creative direction by Nazanin Rafsanjani. This episode was mixed by Sam Baer, sound design by Bobby Lord, music by Dan Brunel, and music direction by Matt Bowl. Technical direction by Zach Schmidt. Special thanks to Caitlin Delana, Oscar Zabayos, and WBEZ 91.5 Chicago. Learn more about the show at Gatorade.com/podcasts. I'm Domonique Foxworth. Thanks for listening.